Okay, let's unpack this. We're about to dive into a story that really kicks off in a tense federal courtroom.
Right, but it spirals out pretty quickly into something much bigger. It raises some fundamental questions about, well, how justice is supposed to work.
Yeah, imagine standing there, federal courthouse,
Yeah,
you feel the weight of the law,
right.
and then suddenly things just explode.
And not over the legal points, which is what you'd expect.
Exactly. It becomes about accusations of bias, personal attacks, and then this just stunning revelation hidden in a sealed envelope.
Mm-hmm.
So today's deep dive, it's really sparked by these sources detailing a confrontation. It involves Judge James Boasberg and Tom H. Homan, the former acting ICE director.
And the hearing itself started focused on deportations, right?
Yeah.
Under the Alien Enemies Act. There was this court order that was allegedly defied.
But the sources we're looking at show it became about something, well, much deeper pretty fast. We're talking about the integrity of the court itself.
So we're drawing from courtroom accounts, details from a sworn affidavit that comes up later, info from investigators, media reports,
Right.
and we're going to try and piece together what happened, why it mattered so much, and, what this one event might tell us about potential cracks in the system.
Yeah, public trust in the courts, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So our mission here, cut through the noise, really understand the key moments, the surprising details too,
Mm-hmm.
and see what this specific clash, tells us about that broader picture. Judicial independence, accountability.
Let's get into it.
Okay, setting the scene. Federal courthouse, Denver. Sources say anticipation was high. Reporters outside, mics ready, though cameras weren't allowed inside.
Right. And inside courtroom 5D, you've got Judge James Boasberg presiding. Now, he had previously issued a temporary restraining order, a TRO.
Basically telling them to pause.
Yeah, halting certain deportations under this old Alien Enemies Act, pending his review.
That's not what happened.
That's the core conflict right there. The administration, despite the order, moved forward with deportations. Reports mentioned flights from San Diego, Dallas.
Including Venezuelans claiming asylum, the sources note.
Yes, specifically them. And standing there at the defense table is Tom Homan, former acting ICE director, known for, well, not backing down.
So how did he argue their case initially?
Sources say Homan argued DHS acted within its legal authority. They used this 200-year-old law, the Alien Enemies Act.
His point being, it was legal.
Basically, yeah. Legal, even if the judge didn't like it and they didn't need his permission given the law, regardless of the TRO. That seems to be the gist of his initial argument.
Okay, but Judge Boasberg, obviously he saw it differently.
Right. Accounts say Boasberg pushed back immediately. He zeroed in on the fact that his direct order, the TRO, was apparently ignored.
And this is where it gets really interesting, according to the sources.
Oh, yeah. Homan's reply was sharp. He repeated they responded to a national security threat, used legal authority.
Standard defense so far.
But then he adds, they didn't wait for permission from a bench that's been swayed by politics more than precedent.
Wow. Okay. That's direct.
You can imagine the reaction. Gasps reported in the courtroom. It just instantly shifted everything.
From legal argument to something else.
Totally. And Boasberg, reports say, immediately picked up on that. Asked Homan straight up, are you accusing this court of bias?
Did Homan back down?
Nope. Sources say he held his ground, said the law should stand on its own. But then he twists the needle deeper.
How so?
He adds, without influence from nonprofits feeding you arguments behind closed doors.
Oof. Okay, now it's personal and suggesting some kind of improper back channel.
Exactly. That line really landed, according to the accounts, made it deeply personal.
Like tension.
Palpable. Sources say Boasberg's voice rose, reminded Homan he was under subpoena, there to answer questions, not lecture the court or question his integrity.
And Homan's response.
Reportedly fired back, then don't make this personal, Judge.
Just back and forth, escalate.
Absolutely. And it's in that charged atmosphere, witnesses say, that Boasberg delivers this critical blow, not with volume, sources say, but like cold precision.
In front of everyone. Packed courtroom, senators reportedly there.
Yes. He says, you want to defend actions that violate my direct order, fine. But don't pretend you have credibility left. Your track record speaks for itself.
Ouch. That's not about the law anymore.
No, that shifted it entirely. It became about pride, reputation, power, right there in the open.
So Homan's just been dressed down publicly by a federal judge. What happens next?
In that silence, Homan reportedly, very calmly, reaches into his briefcase.
Okay.
Sources say he stated he hoped he wouldn't need this, but that he wouldn't stand there and be accused of corruption by someone who, in his view, should be recusing himself anyway.
Well, meaning stepping aside due to a conflict.
Right, and then he holds up this sealed manila envelope.
The envelope.
Marked internal confidential report, had an OIG agent's signature, Office of Inspector General, usually an internal watchdog.
So official looking.
Very. Homan clarifies. It's a sworn affidavit. A statement made under oath.
From who?
From one of your own, is what he reportedly said, looking towards the bench.
And before Boasberg can really react.
The clerk announces a brief recess. Sources say Boasberg didn't actually call for it himself.
Interesting.
But he accepted it. Just a nod, apparently, and left the bench without another word.
Leaving everyone hanging.
Totally. When court reopened, reports say the tension was just thick. Everyone's eyes on that envelope. Boasberg wasn't back yet?
So who was there?
A senior clerk just came out and stated the matter was under review. That's it. The contents were now the big mystery.
So outside the courtroom drama, what's happening? Homan's with his lawyer.
Yeah, Rebecca Lipton. Sources note she has a reputation for tackling judicial misconduct cases.
Okay.
And she reportedly reminds Homan about a past run-in. Boasberg tried to block ICE access to sanctuary city databases back in 2018. Lipton apparently felt that was personal for Homan, too.
So there's history there.
Seems like it. And Homan, 30-plus years in law enforcement. Sources say he felt this case was different. He'd been hearing whispers.
Before the hearing?
Yeah, about potential backdoor coordination, courts and advocacy groups. And Boasberg's name kept coming up, apparently.
Which brings us back to the affidavit. Who wrote it?
The sources reveal it was Daniel Foster, a 29-year-old former court assistant, worked right there in Judge Boasberg's chambers.
And he wasn't there anymore.
Right. Reports confirm he'd vanished from the court roster about 2 months earlier. No public reason given.
So what did Foster allege in this sworn statement?
He alleged Boasberg had informal, off-the-record contact with a specific nonprofit, the Global Justice Initiative, or GJI.
And GJI was involved in this case.
Critically, yes. Sources confirm GJI had submitted amicus briefs. Those are documents from outside parties offering arguments in this specific case.
Arguing what?
Arguing for the deportations to be blocked.
Okay, so contact with a party arguing in the case. But what was the really shocking detail?
Foster claimed he was asked to review, maybe even run redrafts of GJI's briefs.
Before they were filed.
Exactly, before they were officially submitted to the court. And even more, he alleged some edits or suggestions actually came from the judge's chambers before GJI had even sent the drafts over.
Whoa. Okay, unpack that. Why is reviewing drafts before filing such a big deal?
Foster's statement, according to these sources, described it as completely outside standard procedure. He called it not appropriate, explicitly called it tampering.
Use the word tampering.
Yeah, phrases like not legal, not even gray area. The implication, really, is that it wasn't just improper contact. It was potentially shaping the arguments before they even became part of the official record.
Undermining the whole idea of the court being neutral.
That's the core issue, the sources frame. It suggests influencing the case from behind the scenes.
So Boasberg eventually comes back to the courtroom after this recess.
About 20 minutes later, yeah. Sources say he appeared visibly rattled. He acknowledged getting Homan's submission, the envelope, but stated, pretty stickly apparently, "For the record, I categorically deny any impropriety."
And Lipton, Homan's lawyer.
Her response, according to accounts, was just ice cold. She reportedly said, "No one accused you yet," then added, "That's the problem."
Ouch. More gasps.
Reportedly, yes, it landed hard.
What did she do then?
Formally requested a hearing on judicial misconduct and demanded Boasberg's immediate recusal from the case because of the affidavit's claims.
Throw him on the spot.
Big time. Sources say Boasberg hesitated, looked over at the court clerk, who was apparently pale.
What did he decide?
He abruptly called another recess, said it was until further notice, just stopped everything.
And as he left.
Critically, as he stepped off the bench this time, sources noted 2 U.S. Marshals moved into position near the exit, kind of strategically placed.
And Lipton.
Walked right up to the Marshals and handed them a copy of the affidavit, right then and there, before the doors closed.
Wow. Okay. Now, you mentioned something earlier, a detail missed in the chaos.
Yeah, sources highlight this moment, caught by reporters and the court transcript. That happened just before that first recess, before the envelope even came out.
Another comment from Boasberg to Homan.
Yes, and this one wasn't legal, wasn't judicial. It was just a personal insult, designed to humiliate him, sources suggest.
Okay.
He reportedly said, "You've always been good at playing the patriot. Too bad no one with real authority ever took you seriously.
In open court.
In open court, federal courtroom.
I must say hit hard.
Sources say for Homan, that comment just solidified this feeling that the system wasn't even pretending to be fair anymore. His reported description was naked power, unmasked, and unbothered.
Just raw. Okay, so the court is in recess again. What happens when they eventually resume?
Later that afternoon, yeah. But Judge Boasberg isn't on the bench.
Replaced.
Temporarily, yes. A magistrate judge, Patricia Harris, takes over.
And Lipton.
Immediately requests the full Daniel Foster affidavit be read aloud into the public record. Judge Harris agrees.
So everyone hears the details.
Right. As a marshal reads it out loud, the dates, the document versions, file names, internal memos, even mentions of metadata.
Like digital fingerprints showing when files were accessed.
Exactly. Allegedly showing Boasberg reviewed drafts weeks early. The courtroom, reports say, just absorbed the scale of it in stunned silence.
Any reaction during the reading?
Sources note a reporter spoke out from the back, said something like, if this is true, the judge basically tampered with the case before it even started.
How did Judge Harris respond?
She reportedly said it was not for this room to decide, acknowledging the severity but keeping procedural order. The comment landed, though.
And outside the courtroom, the investigation heating up.
Oh, yeah. Reports from investigators say officials across the street at the U.S. Attorney's Office were already pulling Boasberg's past case files involving GGI.
So the scope was widening immediately.
Definitely beyond this one hearing. Then Judge Harris makes it official, announces Boasberg is off the case permanently.
And the DOJ.
Department of Justice notified. Court will cooperate fully. It was formal confirmation, the sources say. The hammer had dropped.
What was Homan's reaction to that official news?
Telling, according to those there. He quietly said to Lipton, "You think this is about immigration. It's about rot. Deep, deep rot."
Saw it as a symptom of something bigger.
Exactly. And the story just exploded from there. Social media, Daniel Foster's name trending.
Even though he was reportedly laying low in Boulder.
Right. Legal watchdogs started calling for audits of all Boasberg's rulings. Congress announced plans for an emergency hearing on judicial ethics.
What about Homan OIG?
He met with OIG agents. They reportedly took his statement, but also gave him a warning.
Which was?
The judiciary protects its own. Kind of a reality check.
But Homan wasn't deterred.
Sources say he believed, not this time. And later that evening, it's confirmed. Boasberg suspended, cases reassigned, affidavits sealed as part of the growing federal probe.
But it didn't end there, did it?
No. Just as the DOJ was seemingly getting its arms around the Foster affidavit, sources reveal a second whistleblower surfaced.
Claiming what?
Reportedly claiming Boasberg's alleged actions went even further than what Foster described.
Yeah. Okay. And what was happening with Boasberg himself?
That same evening, sources say his chambers were restricted. He wasn't arrested, not yet, but he was questioned by a DOJ ethics investigator.
And that investigator's take?
Sources familiar with the probe say the investigator referred to the alleged actions as a conspiracy. Strong language.
Then there was a search.
Under a sealed warrant, yes. Investigators went into his office, seized hard drives, notebooks, and this unregistered external USB drive.
Unregistered.
Yeah. Sources close to the investigation later suggested that USB drive became part of a separate, reportedly darker investigation branching off from this.
And the second whistleblower, where did they come from?
Reportedly from inside GJI, the nonprofit.
Okay, that's significant. What did they provide?
Internal emails, apparently, showing coordinated messaging strategies allegedly shared directly with Judge Boasberg's law clerk.
So, corroborating Foster's claims from the other side.
Potentially, yes, showing communication channels. Meanwhile, back in Denver, the courthouse started attracting protesters.
The usual political groups.
Media reports described them differently. More like everyday people, angry about perceived corruption, feeling betrayed, demanding answers.
Where's Boasberg at this point? Still just suspended.
Sources indicate he ended up in federal holding. Not formally charged yet, but detained as the investigation escalates. Options shrinking fast, reportedly.
Grant Homan gets official word.
Yeah, formal notice. Boasberg on administrative leave, allegations deemed credible by DOJ and OIG.
His reaction.
Sources say he saw it not as justice served, but just the beginning.
Because it was becoming clear this wasn't just about Boasberg.
Exactly. Washington was buzzing. Lawmakers who had apparently had suspicions about the judiciary started digging into the affidavit, the new details.
Then they found links to other judges.
Legislative sources reportedly flagged at least 4 other federal judges in different states mentioned in those same GJI communication chains.
Same pattern.
Reportedly, yes. Suggestions for legal phrasing, apparent document exchanges before deadlines, vague calendar entries hinting at coordination.
So Homan talks to Congress.
Sources say he communicated with House Oversight, told them if multiple judges' chambers were involved in this kind of strategy sharing with groups like GJI, the issue reached further than this building.
Leading to
A promised congressional hearing, not just on Boasberg, but a fundamental review of how amicus briefs are used or potentially misused across the whole federal system.
So these briefs meant to inform, now under suspicion as tools for influence.
That's the concern being raised, yeah. And while the political side started forming, you know how that goes.
Sure.
Reports suggest everyday people were asked a much simpler question. Can you trust the judge? Homan's naked power, quote, really seemed to resonate. Became a meme, apparently.
Because it felt like confirmation of a system maybe not always being fair.
Exactly. Felt like a moment where the mask slipped.
What's the status of the investigation now?
DOJ task force expanded significantly. Daniel Foster, still in Boulder reportedly, just watching it unfold. Feels tired, sources say.
And Lipton.
Preparing Homan for potential congressional testimony. Sources say she's pushing for it, wants the public to hear his side about the alleged silent pressure and favors.
Then another shoe drops.
Yeah, an internal DOJ memo reportedly leaks, names a third federal judge, this one in Boston, under quiet investigation.
Same pattern. GJI, early drafts.
Allegedly similar patterns, yes. And suddenly, it's not the Boasberg story, it's bigger, dubbed judicial gate in some reports.
Systemic.
That's the word being used. And sources stress this isn't really about left versus right politics. It's about that core idea of impartiality, where judges allegedly picking sides in secret.
Homan spoke to reporters again.
Yeah, outside the Denver courthouse. Looked resolute but tired, accounts say.
With his message.
Said when judges allegedly take advice from nonprofits before a hearing, it's not justice. He called it choreography.
Strong word.
And called it not just a legal failure, but a betrayal of getting a fair shot in court. Said he believes in law and order standing on its own merit.
Did he think anything would change?
His reported answer was pretty blunt. Depends on whether people are actually paying attention.
Leaves it up to the public, in a way.
Seems like it. And while the legal analysts debate, sources suggest the real conversation happening is about trust. If you can't trust the courtroom, what's left?
And Daniel Foster, the first whistleblower.
Reports say he eventually turned his phone back on, got messages, but then sat down to write, felt the truth still had more to come out.
And behind the scenes?
The Judiciary Committee formally started inquiries into amicus brief practices, more potential whistleblowers reportedly emerging, detailing similar patterns. The sources paint a picture of real, potentially widespread cracks revealed by this one confrontation.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, listening? We started with this really dramatic courtroom clash.
Right, the Boasberg confrontation.
Yeah.
But as we followed the threads through these sources, it quickly exposed potential vulnerabilities deep within the judicial system itself.
Yeah, it really forced questions about judicial impartiality, the integrity of the whole process.
And we saw how those specific details that personal insult Boasberg reportedly threw,
The sudden appearance of the affidavit.
the metadata trail mentioned, the whispers of coordination beforehand. All those details bring this complex issue to life. They reveal connections that weren't obvious at first glance.
It's definitely a reminder that, being informed isn't just about the headlines. It's about looking closely at the actions, the potential motivations, the ripple effects. Asking those critical questions, thinking about the wider implications for the systems we count on.
Yeah, this story started with that tense standoff, revealed potential rot, as Homan put it. But it really ends with a question for everyone listening. A question about accountability. What do we actually expect from the institutions that promise us fairness?
It makes you think. Justice isn't just some abstract idea or a building or a title.
No, the sources here suggest it's also about choices. Choices made every day by people with real power in that system.
And what happens when those choices, as alleged in this case, seem to serve power or influence instead of the principles they're sworn to uphold?
What does fairness truly mean to you in that light? And maybe what role do you feel you play just as a citizen in expecting accountability, demanding it even, no matter who's in the spotlight?